The foreign support in the Winter War contained materiel, men and moral support to the Finnish struggle against the Soviet Union in the Winter War. World opinion at large supported the Finnish cause. The World War had not yet begun in earnest and was known to the public as the Phony War at the time. The Winter War was the only real fighting in Europe besides the German and Soviet invasion of Poland, and thus held major world interest. The Soviet aggression was generally deemed unjustified. Various foreign organizations sent material aid, such as medical supplies. Finnish immigrants in the United States and Canada returned home, and many volunteers traveled to Finland to join Finland's forces. 8,700 Swedes, 1,010 Danes, about 1,000 Estonians, 725 Norwegians, 372 Ingrams, 366 Hungarians, 346 Finnish expatriates, more than 20 Latvians and 190 volunteers of other nationalities made it to Finland before the war was over. Pope Pius XII condemned the Soviet attack on the 26th of December 1939, in a speech at the Vatican, and later donated a signed and sealed prayer on behalf of Finland. Hungary. Only Hungarians sent volunteers as an organized unit according to the initial Finnish requirements. Quote, "When the Winter War broke out between Finland and the Soviet Union, many Hungarians felt great sympathy towards the Finns and wanted to help them. The Hungarian government officially did not support Finland, but secretly started to search for ways of helping. In addition, non-governmental organizations began to organize support for Finland. Hungary helped Finland by giving monetary donations, armaments and military volunteers. Nobel Prize winner Albert Szent-Györgyi offered all of his prize money to Finland. Count Paltelecki's government sent armaments and war equipment valued at 1 million Hungarian pengos during the Winter War. The recruiting of volunteers started on the 16th of December. During the Winter War, around 25,000 Hungarian men applied to fight in Finland. Finally, 350 applications were accepted. The military training started at the 10th of January and it took almost a month. The volunteers formed a battalion what was commanded by Lieutenant Imre Kemeri-Nagy. The Hungarian Volunteer Detached Battalion had 24 officers, 52 non-commissioned officers, 2 doctors and 2 padres, a total of 346 officers and men. Travel to Finland was very difficult, because the German Reich forbade transit of armaments and war equipment across its territory. Therefore, volunteers had to travel across Yugoslavia, Italy, France, the United Kingdom, Norway and Sweden to make the ways to Finland. They traveled without any weapons by a special train, officially classified as tourists going to ski camp. Finally, the battalion arrived in Finland at the 2nd of March after 3 weeks traveling. In Finland, the battalion was quartered in Lapua, in the training center of the International Volunteers. In Lapua, they took part in another military training, learned skiing and winter warfare. Before the Hungarian battalion could see military action, the Moscow Peace Treaty was signed. On the 12th of March in Moscow, so many volunteers felt frustration. In the last days of March, Field Marshal Mannerheim visited Lapua where he met the Hungarian battalion. He expressed his thanks to the volunteers for coming to Finland and he promoted Lieutenant Imre Kemeri-Nagy to captain. For the 17th of April to the 19th of May, the Hungarian battalion served in Karelia, at the new state border in Lappeenranta. The Hungarian battalion was embarked at Turku at the 20th of May 1940, from where a steamboat sailed to Stettin, German Reich. They traveled across the German Reich by a special train with a German guard. The volunteers arrived at Budapest on the 28th of May. Outside the Hungarian Volunteer Detached Battalion, other Hungarian volunteers fought in the Winter War in the Finnish army. They went to Finland individually. Second Lieutenant Matthews Pirati served in the Finnish Air Force and took part in more than 20 sorties. Warrant Officer Vilmos Bekas's plane disappeared over the Gulf of Bothnia. GE Acute ZA Sipesi, along with 4 fellows from the Military Technical College of Berlin, went to Finland where he was wounded in action. The story of the Hungarian volunteering troops was published by Antal Ruprecht in a bilingual book in 2003. Italy. As a fascist government, the Kingdom of Italy had staunchly supported Francisco Franco in Spain in his fight against Republican communists and anarchists supported by the Soviet Union. Italy therefore promptly responded to requests by the Republic of Finland for military assistance and equipment for use against the communist government of the Soviet Union. The Royal Italian Air Force sent 35 Fiat G50 fighters, while the Royal Italian Army supplied 94,500 new M193 7.35 mm rifles for use by Finnish infantry. However, Germany intercepted most of Italy's aid and only released it once peace had been made. Also, a handful of Italian volunteers fought in the Winter War on the side of Finland. Norway. The Norwegian government did not allow officers or under-officers to volunteer for the war in Finland out of fear that would aggravate the Germans. Of the 725 Norwegians that volunteered to fight for Finland, only 125 made to the relatively tranquil Salla front, and that just 3 weeks before the war ended. None of the volunteers were killed or wounded. Many of the volunteers were unfit for fighting, and many ended up in rest homes and institutions for alcoholics during the stay in Finland. Several of the future leaders of the Norwegian resistance movement, such as Max Manus and Leif Shetland Larsen, were among the volunteers. The most highly decorated Norwegian in the later resistance movement, Gunnar Sosteby, spent his stay as an office clerk. In addition to the military volunteers, 30 doctors and 40 nurses went to help the Finnish medical system. Under the auspices of the Norwegian People's Aid, there were numerous nationwide collections campaigns of supplies and money in Norway to help the Finns. In all, the Finland collection brought in some 2 million Norwegian kroner, the largest popular collection in Norwegian history. 6 training aircraft were purchased for part of these funds. Initial flying training was given close to Oslo, with these aircraft to students sent from Finland. An important venue for collections for Finland were sporting events, several of which were held for the benefit of Finland in Norway during the war. Some 50,000 backpacks filled with supplies were collected in Norway and dispatched to Finland. Collections of rifles and home-knitted shooting gloves also took place. Sigrid Undset, Norwegian author and Nobel laureate, donated her Nobel medal to Finland on the 25th of January 1940. The Norwegian government secretly donated the Finns 12 German-made 7.5 cm field gun M01s in February 1940. Included in the covert artillery transfer were 12,000 shells. Norway also allowed the transfer of aircraft to Finland via Sola Air Station near Stavanger. Norwegian volunteers took part in the assembly of some of the aircraft at the Saab factory in Trollhättan, Sweden. One of the main reasons that Franco-British plan, Operation Avonhead, to send troops to Finland never materialized was that Norway would not allow them to use the ports and territory for troops transfer. They explicitly threatened to fire upon any ship that came near Trondheim and Narvik on that mission. The North Norwegian county of Finnmark received over 1,000 Finnish refugees from Petsamo by the 6th of February 1940. 1940, as the Red Army advanced through that lightly defended area. Finnish civilians sought shelter on the Norwegian side of the Pacific, parts Joki River. By the end of the war, some 1,600 Finnish civilians had fled to Norway. Finnish soldiers of the independent Lapland group that retreated across the border into Finnmark were transported south and interned at Tegra, fortress in the Nord-Trøndelag county of central Norway. The internees were released and returned to Finland at the turn of the year 1939–1940. As the Finns had retreated in the northern areas, they had carried out a scorched earth policy, destroying all housing and infrastructure to obstruct the Soviet advance. After the end of the war, the Norwegian aid continued, and was shifted to reconstruction aid. When Norway was itself invaded by the Germans on the 9th of April 1940, the Finnish government immediately notified that the remaining money set off for Norwegian aid work in Finland could be diverted to use in Norway. Poland. Poland's Prime Minister Władysław Sikorski, despite the ongoing occupation of Poland, had promised to send support of Polish Independent Highland Brigade to help the Finns in fighting. The help was organized late, however, and never reached Finland. Nevertheless, 6 volunteers from Poland fought with the Finns during the war. Sweden, which had declared itself to be a non-belligerent rather than a neutral country, contributed military supplies, cash, credits, humanitarian aid, and some 8,700 Swedish volunteers prepared to fight for Finland. The Swedish army, which had been downsizing its armed forces since the 1920s, transferred approximately 1/3 of its equipment to Finland, among them 135,000 rifles and 330 guns and large quantities of ammunition. A small number of aeroplanes was given to Swedish Voluntary Air Force in action from the 7th of January, with 12 Gloster Gladiator II fighters, 5 Hawker Hart bombers, and 8 other planes, amounting to 1/3 of all the Swedish Air Force's fighters at the time. The volunteer pilots and mechanics were drawn from the ranks. The renowned aviator Count Carl Gustav von Rosen, nephew of Karen Göring, Hermann Göring's first wife, volunteered independently. There was also a volunteer workforce of about 900 workers and engineers. In March, the unit was to be reinforced with 5 Junkers Ju-86 bombers. On the 11th of March, the bombers were in the Swedish town of Boden with all preparations completed, but the end of hostilities on the 13th precluded the deployment. The Swedish Volunteer Corps, with 8,402 men in Finland, the only common volunteers who had finished training before the war ended, began relieving 5 Finnish battalions at Markajärvi in mid-February, together with 3 remaining Finnish battalions. The Corps faced 2 Soviet divisions and were preparing for an attack by mid-March, but were inhibited by the peace agreement. 33 men died in action, among them the commander of the 1st Relieving Unit, Lieutenant Colonel Magnus Diersin. The Swedish volunteers remain a source of dissonance between Swedes and Finns. The domestic debate in Finland had in the years immediately before the war given common Finns hope of considerably more support from Sweden, such as a large force of regular troops, that could have had a significant impact on the outcome of the war, or possibly caused the Soviets not to attack at all. However, the help from volunteers, especially the Scandinavian ones, was appreciated by the Finns. This is shown by the fact that during the Norwegian campaign against the German invasion in April 1940, a Finnish group of volunteers formed an ambulance unit and helped the defenders until forced to return home because of the success of the German armed forces. A group of Swedish and Finnish volunteers also fought alongside Norwegian soldiers against the German invaders Neros on the 2nd of May as well. France and United Kingdom. The British government sold the Finnish Air Force 30 Bristol Blenheim bombers. US-made Brewster B-239s came too late to participate in combat missions, and the same applied to 10 Hawker Hurricane I fighters. The British government also provided quantities of small arms and ammunition, including a large number of obsolete Boys anti-tank rifles in 1939 and 1940. France also sent aircraft, including the Morant Saulnier MS.406 fighter. In 1940, it was decided to send a new fighter, the Caudron Renault C-714. 6 C-714s previously marked for shipment to the Polish Air Force were placed in containers and diverted to Havre Harbour for shipment to Finland. On 12 March 1940, the first 6 aircraft were already on the way to Finland when news of the armistice between Finland and the Soviet Union was received. At the time deliveries were halted. 10 aircraft were in containers at Le Havre waiting to be lifted to the ships, and 3 more were on the way from Paris. The French army also supplied small arms and ammunition, mostly of obsolete design. Franco-British plans for intervention. Within a month, the Soviet leadership began to consider abandoning the operation, and on 29 January 1940, via intermediaries in Sweden, Finland's government was approached on the subject of preliminary peace negotiations. Until this point, Finland had fought for its existence as an independent and democratic country. However, at the news that Finland might be forced to cede its territory as sovereignty, public opinion in France and Britain, already favorable to Finland, swung in favor of intervention. When rumors of an armistice reached governments in Paris and London, both decided to offer military support. When France and Britain realized that Finland was considering a peace treaty, they gave a new offer of 50,000 troops if Finland asked for help before 12 March. Through Soviet agents in the French and British governments, indications of Franco-British plans reached Stalin, and may have contributed heavily to his decision to increase military pressure on the Finnish army, while at the same time offering to negotiate an armistice. Because of the Soviet Union's vast numbers of troops and reserves, it has been argued that without massive Allied intervention, nothing could have deterred the Soviet Union from conquering the entirety of Finland. United States. The Soviet attack outraged Americans, with some businesses refusing to sell supplies to the Soviet regime, responding to a call from a manufacturer who refused to sell to the aggressor. The American-Russian Chamber of Commerce compared his objections to sell to a man because he beats his wife. In December 1939, sympathetic Americans led by former President Herbert Hoover formed the Finnish Relief Fund to donate money to aid Finnish civilians and refugees. By the end of January, it had already sent more than $2 million to the Finns.